I'm 79. My name is Arthur Finch. The hardest part of living alone isn't the loneliness, not really. It's how loud the house becomes. The silence here isn't silent at all. It's a canvas, and every little noise paints itself on it in bold, startling strokes. I sit in my chair by the window, the same one I've had for 40 years, and I feel the weight of the sound. It presses in from the corners. This is where a memory of my wife, Eleanor, feels closest. Let me tell you what happened. It started with the quiet, or what I thought was quiet. You see, after Eleanor was gone, the house should have been still, but it wasn't. It was full of noises I'd never heard before. The worst was the refrigerator. Honestly, it's a new one. But in the dead of night, its hum turned into a long, drawn-out sigh. It would cycle on and off. 17 minutes of sighing, 8 minutes of breathless silence. I timed it. I'd sit at the kitchen table in the dark, just waiting for it to start again. Eleanor would have called me foolish. She'd have said, "Artie, come back to bed. It's just an appliance." But she wasn't there to say it. Then the house started using her voice. Not clearly. It was in the white noise. The rush of water in the pipes when I turned on the tap sometimes sounded like Arthur, 2 syllables in the gush. The rustle of the newspaper would sound like her whispering, "It's all right." I knew it wasn't real. My mind was playing tricks. But knowing that doesn't stop you from hoping. You turn your head just a little. I decided to silence it all. I was desperate. I went outside and sawed off the lilac branch that tapped on the window. The sudden quiet felt violent. I called a handyman to nail down the loose floorboard that groaned. When he left, the stair was silent, but it felt dead, like I'd killed something. One night, I unplugged the fridge. The silence that came in was absolute. It was a pressure on my ears. It was worse. I plugged it back in just to hear that sigh again. I was losing. Here's the thing. In my frenzy, I pulled my armchair away from the wall. Behind it, tucked into the baseboard, was a folded square of paper. I knew the stationery, pale blue linen. It was Eleanor's handwriting. My hands went cold. It was just a grocery list. Milk, eggs, coffee, dog biscuits for the neighbor's terrier, asparagus if it looks good. At the bottom it said, "Remember to call Artie at work, re-dinner with the Millers." I sat on the floor and held it. It was the ordinary, beautiful evidence of our life. I carried that note in my shirt pocket for a week. And slowly, I stopped fighting the sounds. I started listening to them differently. The groan of the floorboard wasn't a ghost. It was the house settling, the way it settled under our weight for 50 years. The wind wasn't tapping to get in. It was the same wind that rattled the windows when we first moved in. The refrigerator sigh was the sound of preservation, keeping things cool, keeping things safe. I began to understand. The house wasn't loud with absence. It was loud with presence. My presence. I was the one making it a museum of silence. So I changed things. I went and got Eleanor's old record player from the attic. I played her jazz records, Brubeck, Ella Fitzgerald. I left the radio on in the kitchen. I opened the windows. I started talking back to the house. "I hear you," I'd say to a creak. "I know," I'd murmur to the fridge. I was no longer a prisoner of the quiet. My granddaughter Lucy visited. She's 20, all energy. She laughed and said, "Granddad, it's so noisy in here." She heard chaos. I heard a life. I made her pancakes. The sizzle of the butter, the clatter of the bowl, her chatter. It was a new symphony. When she left, the quiet came back, but it was different. It held the echo of her laugh, not the specter of my grief. The house is still loud. A new branch will grow. Another floorboard will loosen. The fridge will sigh until it breaks. I am 79. I live alone. But I am not living in an empty house. I am living in a house full of time. the sounds of the house breathing around me. My loneliness wasn't about being alone. It was about listening for the wrong things. I was listening for an ending. The house was asking me to continue. So if you're in a quiet house, listening, don't shush it. Listen closer. Your house is not a tomb. It's a witness. Fill it with your own noise. The silence will eat you alive if you let it. But the sound? The sound is just life, insisting on being heard. Go on. Listen. Go on. Listen. That's what I'm doing now. And you know what? It's not easy. Some days the old feeling comes back. The quiet feels loud again. Just last week I was making my tea, and the kettle's whistle sounded so sharp and lonely it made me jump. I stood there and I thought, Eleanor would have been calling from the other room. Don't let it screech, Artie. And for a minute it hurt. It just hurt. I sat at the table with my tea and I let it hurt. I didn't try to turn on the radio. I just sat with it. And the hurt, it passed. It always passes. The sun moved across the table. The fridge sighed, and I was still here. Here's the thing I didn't tell you before. After I found that note, I started looking for more. Not on purpose, not like a treasure hunt. But I'd open a book and find a grocery receipt she'd used as a bookmark. I'd find a note in her handwriting on the back of an old envelope in a drawer. Dry cleaner, Thursday. Nothing important. Everything important. Each one felt like she'd just left the room. I put them all in a little wooden box I keep on the mantel, my box of ordinary things. Then my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, came over. She's a kind woman about my age. Her husband passed a few years back. She brought me some soup. She came in and she heard the radio playing. She said, Arthur, it's nice to hear some life in here. We sat at the kitchen table. We didn't talk much. We just ate the soup. And for a while, the house wasn't just my noise. It was our spoons clinking, her soft voice asking if I needed anything from the store. When she left, the quiet felt warm. It felt friendly. But the real test came last month. My son David came to visit. He lives across the country. He worries. He walked in and he gave me that look. The "how are you really, Dad" look. He said the house looked good, but I saw him noticing the radio on, the record player out. He said, "You've got a lot of sound in here." I could tell he thought it was strange. Maybe he thought I was losing it. We had dinner. I made a roast like I used to. The oven timer dinged. The potatoes sizzled. We talked about his work. It was normal. It was nice. When he was leaving, he hugged me tight. He said, "I'm glad you're keeping busy, Dad." He meant well. He doesn't understand that I'm not busy. I'm just living. I'm listening. That visit made me tired, though, all that trying to seem okay. After he left, I felt empty. The house felt too big again. I went to bed early. But in the middle of the night, I woke up. The wind was howling. A storm was coming. And I heard a new sound, a rattling, banging sound from the back porch. I got up. My heart was pounding. I turned on the light. It was the old screen door. The latch had broken. It was swinging open and slamming shut in the wind. Bang, bang, bang. It was a terrible, angry sound. I stood there in my pajamas watching it. I felt that old desperation. I wanted to make it stop. I wanted to go out in the rain and nail it shut. But then I thought of the lilac branch. I thought of the dead silence after I cut it. So I didn't go outside. I just stood at the window. I watched it bang, and I listened. And you know what I heard? I didn't hear a ghost. I didn't hear an accusation. I heard a door that needed fixing. A simple, real problem. The house wasn't haunting me. It was asking for help. I stood there at the window, watching the door bang. The house wasn't haunting me. It was asking for help. And I knew I couldn't fix it. Not in the dark, in the rain. I went back to bed and listened to it slam until the storm passed. It was just a sound. A broken thing making noise. The next morning, I called Mrs. Gable's son, Mike. He came over and fixed the latch in 10 minutes. He's a good kid. He said, "All set, Mr. Finch." I thanked him. I made us both a coffee. We sat on the porch steps in the sun. He told me about his new baby. I listened. The door was quiet behind us. But that night something broke in me. I was tired, so tired. I went to get the little wooden box from the mantel. I wanted to hold one of Eleanor's notes. I opened it, and I saw them all. The grocery lists, the dry cleaner reminders, the note about calling me at work. I took them out. I spread them on the kitchen table. I looked at her handwriting, and I started to cry. Not a few tears. I sobbed. I put my head down on the table, right on top of those bits of paper, and I cried like I hadn't since the funeral. It was a storm inside me. I missed her so much it felt like my bones were breaking. I said it out loud to the empty kitchen. I can't do this anymore. I can't live here with all these ghosts of you. The fridge sighed. The house creaked. They were just sounds. They couldn't answer me. That was the hardest moment, the deepest low. I sat there for a long time, my face wet, my body aching. I felt completely broken. I thought about calling David. I thought about asking him to find me a place, one of those quiet apartments for old people. A place with no memories in the walls, a place that wouldn't talk to me. Then, I don't know why, I picked up one of the notes, the first one I found. Milk, eggs, coffee, dog biscuits. I traced the words with my finger, and I remembered something, a specific day. It was a Saturday. I was in the garden. Eleanor came to the back door, this very note in her hand. She said, "Artie, I'm going to the store. Need anything?" I said no. She said, "The Millers are coming at 7. Don't get too dirty." She smiled. Then she left. I could see it. The sun was on her hair. I could hear her car start in the driveway. That was all. Just an ordinary minute from an ordinary day. It wasn't a grand memory. It was nothing. But it was everything. And I realized the cost of leaving this house. It wasn't just leaving the groaning floorboards. It was leaving the last place she said my name. It was leaving the kitchen where she wrote those lists. It was leaving the porch steps where she drank her morning coffee. If I went to some quiet apartment, I'd be leaving her behind. I'd be silencing the last echoes. The house wasn't full of ghosts. It was full of her, and me, and us. And if I ran from the noise, I was running from that. I gathered the notes back into the box. My hands were steady. I put the box back on the mantel. I felt hollowed out, empty, but clean, like the storm had washed me out. I knew then I wouldn't leave. The house needed me to fix its latch, and I needed the house to hold my memories, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones. We were stuck with each other. I went to my chair by the window. The evening light was coming in. I didn't feel peace, not yet, but I felt a decision. It was solid in my chest. This was my home. The sounds were my life, all of it. This was my home. The sounds were my life, all of it. And here's what I learned, sitting in that chair as the light faded. I was wrong about the quiet. I thought it was the enemy. I thought every creak was a reminder of what I'd lost. But I was listening wrong. I was listening like someone at a funeral, waiting for the final hymn. The house wasn't holding a funeral. It was just living. And it was asking me to live in it, not just haunt it. My mistake was thinking love was about preserving a moment. I wanted the house to be a perfect museum of when Eleanor was here. I wanted the silence to be respectful. But love isn't a museum. It's not a sealed room. Love is a current. It moves. It changes. When I heard her toe tapping in the scratchy Brahms record, it broke my heart because I thought it was a ghost. I see now it wasn't a ghost. It was a gift. The house was giving me back a piece of her I'd forgotten. The pain was the price of the gift. You can't have one without the other. Grief isn't the opposite of love. It's the proof of it. And proof is a noisy thing. It rattles around in the pipes and sighs from the appliances. What I should have done from the start, what I'm doing now, is much simpler. I stopped performing my grief. I stopped thinking I had to sit in perfect silence to honor her. That's not what she would have wanted. She'd have wanted me to make a mess in the kitchen. She'd have wanted me to play the music too loud. She'd have wanted me to hear a floorboard creak and think, yes, this old house is still standing. Not, that's where she used to walk. The love was in the living, not in the perfect, painful preservation of the past. The house taught me that. It kept making its noise, insisting on the present, until I finally heard it. So here is my advice, plain and simple. If you're in a house that feels too loud with memory, don't shush it. But don't just listen to the ghosts either. Talk back. Change the station, literally. If the silence in your kitchen is too heavy, turn on the radio. Not for background noise, but for company. Make a meal that sizzles. Call a friend and don't talk about the past unless it comes up naturally. Talk about the weather, the price of eggs, the ridiculous thing you saw on television. The ordinary is your anchor. It was the ordinary that saved me. A grocery list, a neighbor's soup, a broken latch. Don't perform being okay. Don't perform being sad. Just be there, in the house, with the noise. And if the grief comes in a wave like it did for me at the kitchen table, let it. Sit down right there on the floor if you have to. Let it crash over you. It will pass. The wave always passes. And when it pulls back, you'll still be there. The fridge will still sigh. The sun will have moved across the floor, and you will have survived it. That's the work. Not moving on, not getting over it, just surviving the wave and noticing the quiet that comes after is a little softer, a little kinder, because you're still there to hear it. You still have time. Maybe not decades, maybe not even years, but you have now, and now is enough. Now is where you can choose to hear a house breathing instead of dying. You can choose to be its caretaker, not its prisoner. This isn't about false cheer. It's about a simple, stubborn decision. The decision to add your sound to the layers, to play your music over the memories, to let the new noises, the granddaughter's laugh, the neighbor's voice, the new song on the radio, weave into the old ones. That's how you continue. You don't build a monument. You tend a garden. And a garden is a very noisy place, full of rustling and growing and life. If this story of an old man and his noisy house meant anything to you, if it echoed in your own quiet rooms, then do something for me. Do something for yourself. First, subscribe to this channel. It tells me you're here, that we're listening together. Turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next story. It might be the one you need to hear. Give this video a like. It's a small thing, but it's a signal, a tap on the window saying, I hear you too. Most importantly, go down to the comments. I read them. Tell me, what's the sound in your house you've been fighting? The ticking clock? The empty chair creak? Or tell me what sound you've started to welcome. Let's have a conversation down there. No grand speeches, just a few words between folks who understand the weight of quiet. And if you know someone, a parent, a friend, a neighbor, who might be sitting in a silence that's too loud, share this with them. Just send it. No big note needed. Sometimes the best way to say I'm thinking of you is to hand someone a story and let them find their own way in.